Hi, Tziporah here. Today I'm talking with you about BPD splitting. I'm going to talk about what is splitting, what causes it, or why it happens, some simple brief examples, as well as what it's like as a BPD person to experience a split and what goes on inside, as I myself was diagnosed with BPD and complex PTSD. So what is splitting? Splitting is essentially black or white thinking, meaning there's no gray area. Everything is separated between good and bad. There's all or nothing type thinking. It's an unconscious reaction to external or internal triggers. It is essentially a fight or flight response being activated, and splits can happen towards other people or towards the self even. Now, this can also affect our identity. So many BPD people struggle with an unstable sense of self, and this is often due to the fact that in order to establish a stable sense of self, we need to be able to integrate good and bad parts. Now, when we can't integrate good and bad, it means that we're left with this diffused identity. Now, this also severely impacts relationships. It can be very alarming or confusing to the person that it might be happening to. And if it's happening towards the self, it can also add to a lot of issues such as suicidality and hopelessness and so on. So what causes splitting, or why is splitting something that becomes part of a person? So having BPD or even other mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and more are things that can cause splitting behaviors. Now, if a child grows up in an unhealthy, unsafe, unstable, or dangerous environment, the mind of that child does not learn how to integrate good or bad in a healthy way. So everything becomes safe or unsafe, black or white, good or bad. What can trigger splitting once it's part of a person? It can be stress, abandonment anxiety, relationship conflict. Things that are easy to perceive with someone like this is failure, judgment. These things can also trigger into a split. Uncomfortable, unsafe, or uncertain situations can also be a trigger for this. Another thing that can contribute to BPD splitting is emotional neglect. So emotionally neglected children are unable to learn to trust their true emotional responses. So this can definitely contribute to how a split happens and how far it goes. Here are some very simple, brief examples of what a split might sound like. So the push-pull that we know is common for the borderline behavior. Thoughts like they are a bad person or I am a bad person. They are everything to me. They are nothing to me. I'm never going to be okay. Everything's hopeless. I'd rather not exist. And also self-harm or reckless behaviors. So my splitting comes from having BPD and CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it came from an emotionally neglectful, unsafe, unstable environment as a child and throughout life. Looking back, I realized that the first relationship that was destroyed by a split was when I was 10 years old. It was my best friend, probably my first best friend long term. And I was 10 years old, a new friend came on the scene, and obviously, which I didn't know, my abandonment anxiety came in and I split and I pushed the friend away, and that was the end of that relationship. I was very mean, cruel, and so on. Nobody around knew what was going on. I didn't even know what was going on. It added to my ability to feel like I never fit in anywhere because of that unstable sense of self. It contributed to my troubled teen behaviors and drug use or maladaptive behaviors, unsafe situations, and so on, and unstable and unsafe relationships with lots of drama because the emotions are so severe, going back and forth. So what does it feel like inside when we're splitting? Well, for me, it's like a tunnel vision, and space and time don't really even matter, if that makes sense. So basically, nobody or nothing around matters. There's like a tunnel vision of the issue at hand, of me protecting myself or proving myself, and it's a very severe defense mechanism. So this means I have split in front of my child, which was very shameful for me, and it doesn't mean that I've hurt my child or physically been dangerous to my child. I have tried to repair the emotional toll it could have taken on my child for having seen his mother split, and it causes severe panic or anger and also wanting to feel indifferent. So saying things like, I don't care, but really caring a lot. That can happen a lot in a split. And there's lots of cussing in my mind and out loud. So really, this internal behavior of cursing someone, cussing someone, or having these severe kind of internal dialogues about something is now something that helps observe whether a split is trying to take place. So essentially, the fight or flight response is activated so strongly that my heart would start racing, thoughts of defensiveness are super strong, and it can cause dissociation in order to just try not to act on the split. So also dissociation with lots of stuff going on in the mind, but not acting on it. So that's essentially what it feels like for me inside when a split happens. And I'd be curious to hear what other people would explain their splits like, because it is hard to explain. So my current relationship has been successful, as I'm in remission or recovery, whatever you want to call it. But it used to be like this. It used to be very defensive. Conversations could not take place. Healthy conversations or anything connecting could not happen because of the defensiveness or perceived judgment, abandonment, anxiety, and so on. So anything that was perceived as criticism or being in trouble or questions really would trigger a split type reaction where I couldn't handle a conversation. Now, this was confusing for my husband because when we were dating, this didn't happen, but when we were married, the attachment trauma does take place. So after a split and realizing that it could actually destroy a relationship or create that abandonment that I so strongly did not want, there would be that desperate attempt to clean up or fix the situation, clean up my mess. And that's kind of why you'll see a push-pull with somebody. So the splitting creates that push, and then the regret, remorse, shame, and so on can create the pull. And this can be very difficult for relationships. So there's lots of shame after a split. There's lots of exhaustion because the emotional pressure and weight that comes from it is a lot for someone to deal with. And you can feel in trouble afterwards, like you're kind of hoping that you can, that people can forget about it, or that it wasn't as bad as it truly was. And that shame and guilt is something that definitely needs to be resolved in the healing process. Now, I definitely had to learn to create that gray area instead of black and white thinking. So it is hard to do this, but you do work towards it. You create that gray space, wise mind thought process in order to move forward without splitting, and to be able to observe if something's trying to take place inside of you. So thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, be in touch, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.